The explosions shook the ground beneath Elder Vexhi's feet as he ran through the burning streets of Zalani Prime. The great crystal towers that once reached toward the sky now lay in broken pieces across the city. Smoke filled the air so thick that he could barely see 10 feet ahead. Behind him, the screams of his people echoed through the ruins. The Korthak had been hunting survivors for 3 days now. Their heavy boots stomped through the debris and their deep voices barked orders in their harsh language. They showed no mercy to anyone they found. Vexhi clutched the small communication device against his chest. It was their last hope, the only working transmitter left on the entire planet. He had to reach the old communications tower at the edge of the city. If he could get there, he might be able to send a message to the stars. The old Zalani was not built for running. His legs burned with each step, and his lungs felt like they were on fire. But he kept moving. He had to. The last members of the High Council were dead. The military was destroyed. The evacuation ships had been shot down before they could escape the atmosphere. He was all that remained of his government. A shadow passed overhead. Vexhi threw himself behind a fallen wall just as a Korthic patrol craft flew by. The reptilian soldiers inside were scanning the rubble with their weapons ready. They had orders to kill any Zalani they found. The Korthic did not take prisoners. When the craft moved on, Vexhi crawled out from his hiding place. His robes were torn and dirty. Blood ran down his arm from a cut he had gotten when the council building collapsed. But he was alive. That was more than most of his people could say. The communications tower stood on a hill outside the city. It had been damaged in the first attack, but the main transmitter still worked. Vexhi had helped design it many years ago when he was young and full of hope for the future. Now it was their only chance to reach the galaxy beyond their dying world. He reached the tower just as the sun was setting. The building was empty. All the technicians had fled or been killed. Vexhi climbed the stairs to the main control room. His hands shook as he powered up the old equipment. The screens flickered to life, showing him the stars beyond their system. Vexhi had never tried to send a message this far before. The Zalani had always been a peaceful people who kept to themselves. They had never needed to call for help from strangers, but now they had no choice. He began to type his message. The words came slowly at first, then faster as desperation took hold. He told whoever might be listening about the Korthak invasion. He described how they had attacked without warning, destroying everything in their path. He gave the coordinates of his world and begged for help. The message was simple. They needed evacuation ships. They needed somewhere safe to go. They could pay with what little they had left. Metal, crystals, knowledge. Anything the rescuers wanted in exchange for saving his people. As he finished typing, another explosion rocked the tower. The Korthak had found him. Through the window, he could see their vehicles surrounding the building. Soldiers were getting out, their weapons pointed at the tower. Vexhi's fingers flew over the controls. He had to send the message before they broke down the door. The transmitter hummed as it prepared to launch his words into space. The power readings climbed higher and higher. The door to the control room burst open. 3 Korthak soldiers rushed in, their scales gleaming in the light from the screens. They were tall and strong, with teeth like knives and eyes like burning coals. One of them pointed his weapon at Vexhi and said something in their language. Vexhi looked at the transmission controls. The message was ready. All he had to do was press one button. The soldier took a step closer, his finger on the trigger of his weapon. The old Zalani smiled. He had lived a long life and seen many beautiful things. If this was his end, at least he would die knowing he had tried to save his people. He slammed his hand down on the transmission button. The message shot out into space at the speed of light. It traveled through the void, carrying the last hope of the Zalani people. The words moved from star to star, racing across the galaxy toward unknown civilizations. The Korthak soldier pulled his trigger. Vexhi fell forward across the control panel, his blood mixing with the sparks from the damaged equipment. But his message was already gone, flying through the darkness toward whoever might be listening. Far away. In a system the Zalani had never heard of, the message reached a small monitoring station. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez was sitting at her desk, drinking coffee and watching the star charts. It was the night shift, and nothing ever happened during the night shift. Then her computer beeped. A new signal had arrived. Amy frowned as she looked at the readings. This was different from the usual space noise. It had structure, pattern. It was a message from someone. She ran it through the translation programs. The mathematics were universal, but the language was completely unknown. Slowly, the computer began to make sense of the alien words. Amy's eyes grew wide as she read the translation. It was a cry for help. Someone was dying out there in the dark. Someone was begging for rescue. Amy reached for her communication device. She had to report this right away. Her commanding officer needed to know about this immediately. This was first contact with an alien species, and they were asking for help. She began typing her report, not knowing that she was about to change the course of galactic history. The message would go up through the chain of command, reaching officers who would see it not as a request for aid, but as a military situation requiring immediate action. The Zilani had sent out a call for help. They wanted rescue ships and safe passage to a new world, but they had contacted humans. And humans did not just send aid when they heard cries for help. Humans sent their fleet. Admiral Jake Morrison sat in his command chair aboard the massive space station New Gibraltar. The station hung in orbit around Earth like a steel moon, bristling with weapons and sensors. Morrison had been in charge of Earth's defense for 10 years, and he had never seen anything like the message that lay on his desk. The translation was rough, but the meaning was clear. An alien species called the Zilani was under attack. They were being destroyed by something called the Korthik Empire. The aliens were begging for help, offering to pay with whatever they had left. Morrison picked up the datapad and read the message again. The coordinates showed a star system far beyond any human settlement. The Zilani were hundreds of light years away from Earth, but their description of the attack made Morrison's blood run cold. He had seen this pattern before. Complete destruction of cities, hunting down survivors. No prisoners taken. It was genocide, plain and simple. And from the sound of it, the Korthik were good at it. Morrison pressed a button on his desk. Within minutes, his senior staff began filing into the briefing room. General Lisa Hayes arrived first, her Marine uniform perfectly pressed despite the early hour. She was followed by Captain Ben Torres from Intelligence and Dr. Kevin Walsh, the scientist who had helped decode the alien message. The room filled with officers and specialists. These were the people who protected humanity from threats both known and unknown. They had fought pirates, rebels, and hostile alien life forms. But they had never dealt with something like this. Morrison stood at the front of the room. Behind him, a large screen showed the star charts and the alien message. The officers looked up at him, waiting for orders. 3 hours ago we received this transmission, Morrison began. It came from a star system in the outer rim. The sender identifies himself as Elder Vexhai of the Zilani people. They are under attack by something called the Korthik Empire. The room was silent as Morrison read the translated message aloud. When he finished, General Hayes leaned forward in her chair. "Admiral, this could be a trap," she said. "We don't know anything about these aliens. They could be luring us into an ambush." Dr. Walsh shook his head. The mathematics in the message are consistent with genuine distress. The linguistic patterns show extreme stress. I believe this is real. Captain Torres pulled up a holographic display showing the location of the Zilani system. It's far outside our normal patrol routes. We've never sent ships that far before. We don't know what's out there. Morrison studied the star chart. The Zilani system was indeed far from human space. But if what the message said was true, an entire civilization was being wiped out. And worse, the Korthik Empire sounded like the kind of threat that would not stop with one species. What do we know about their technology? Morrison asked. Dr. Walsh consulted his notes. Based on the transmission strength and the complexity of their language, they appear to be roughly equivalent to our early space age. Maybe a bit more advanced, but not by much. And the Korthak? Unknown. But if they're capable of conquering the Zilani, they must have significant military capabilities. Morrison walked to the window that looked out at Earth. The blue planet turned slowly beneath them, peaceful and beautiful. Billions of people lived down there, most of them unaware of the dangers that lurked in the darkness between the stars. "General Hayes," he said without turning around, "if I authorized a military response, what would you recommend?" The general was quiet for a moment. "A full expeditionary force. We can't send just a few ships into unknown space against an unknown enemy. We need overwhelming firepower and the ability to sustain operations far from home. How long would it take to prepare?" 2 weeks to assemble the fleet. Another week to brief the crews and load supplies. 3 weeks total. Morrison turned back to face his staff. "The Zilani may not have 3 weeks. Admiral," Captain Torres spoke up, "we could send a reconnaissance ship ahead, fast courier, stealth capable. It could reach the system in 10 days and report back on the situation. And if the situation is as bad as the message suggests, then we'll know what we're dealing with when the main fleet arrives." Morrison nodded slowly. It was a good plan. But he could see the doubt in some of his officers' faces. They were asking themselves the same questions he was asking. Why should humanity get involved in a war between alien species? Why risk human lives for people they had never met? The answer came to him as he looked at the alien message again. The Zilani were not asking for weapons or military aid. They were asking for evacuation. They wanted to run away and live in peace somewhere else, but the Korthek were not letting them go. They were hunting down every last survivor. "Dr. Walsh," Morrison said, "in your opinion, how many Zilani are still alive?" The scientist looked uncomfortable. "Based on the timeline in the message and the description of the attacks, I estimate no more than a few 100,000. Maybe less. Out of how many? The message mentions billions." The room fell silent. Morrison could see the same realization dawning on his officers' faces. This was not a war between equals. This was extermination. "General Hayes," Morrison said, "finally, prepare the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet for immediate deployment. I want Admiral Sandra Cole in command. Captain Torres, select your best reconnaissance ship and get it moving within 24 hours. Dr. Walsh, I want everything you can give me about alien psychology and first contact protocols." The officers began to move, but Morrison held up his hand. "One more thing. This is not a peacekeeping mission. This is not a diplomatic mission. If what we're reading is accurate, the Korthek Empire is committing genocide. We will respond accordingly." General Hayes smiled grimly. "Understood. Admiral, what are our rules of engagement?" Morrison looked at the alien message one more time. He thought about Elder Vexhai, who had died trying to save his people. He thought about the Korthik soldiers who were probably still hunting survivors in the ruins of alien cities. "Total war," he said simply. "The Korthik want to destroy civilizations. We'll show them what happens when they mess with one under human protection." The officers filed out of the briefing room, already making plans and preparations. Within hours, the largest human fleet ever assembled would begin moving toward the edge of known space. They were not going to rescue the Zilani. They were going to eliminate the threat that had made rescue necessary. The Korthik Empire had no idea what was coming for them. They had never encountered humans before. They did not know that humanity had learned warfare on a planet where everything was dangerous. They did not know that humans considered the protection of innocent life to be worth dying for. The Zilani had sent out a call for help. Help was coming. But it was not coming in the form they expected. Captain Ryan Burke stood on the bridge of the Silent Hunter as his ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zilani system. The reconnaissance vessel was small and fast, built for stealth operations far from human space. Burke had commanded her for 5 years, and she had never failed him. "Status report," Burke said to his crew. Lieutenant Danny Clark looked up from his communications station. "We're picking up massive energy signatures from the inner system. Looks like weapon fire and explosions. Whatever's happening down there, it's still going on." Burke nodded grimly. They had traveled for 10 days to reach this system, pushing the Silent Hunter to her limits. The hope had been that they would arrive to find the situation stable, maybe even resolved. Instead, it looked like the war was still raging. "Deploy sensor drones," Burke ordered. "I want a complete picture of what we're dealing with. And keep us hidden. We don't know who's watching." The Silent Hunter released a dozen small drones that spread out through the system. Each one was equipped with advanced sensors and stealth technology. They would give Burke the information he needed without revealing his ship's position. The first reports came back within an hour. The drones had found the remains of a once beautiful solar system. Zilani colonies on 3 different planets had been reduced to smoking ruins. Orbital stations hung in space like broken toys. And everywhere, Korthic warships patrolled the debris fields. Burke studied the tactical displays with his officers. The Korthic fleet was massive. Dozens of heavy cruisers, hundreds of smaller ships, and several vessels that could only be described as mobile fortresses. They moved through the system like a pack of hunting animals, searching for any sign of remaining life. "Sir," Lieutenant Clark said quietly, "I'm picking up a transmission. It's very weak, coming from the 3rd planet. The language matches the pattern from the original distress call." Burke felt his heart skip a beat. "Are you saying there are still Zilani alive down there?" "Yes, sir, and they're trying to communicate." Burke moved to the communication station. The message was barely audible through the static and interference. But slowly, the computer was able to clean it up and provide a translation. It was a single Zilani survivor hiding in the ruins of what had once been a great city. The alien was weak and frightened, but still alive. He was asking if anyone could hear him. He was begging for someone to answer. Burke looked at his crew. They all knew the rules. Reconnaissance missions were supposed to gather information and report back. They were not supposed to make contact with alien species. But the voice on the radio sounded so desperate and alone. "Clark, can you establish a secure communication link?" "I think so, sir. But if we transmit, there's a chance the Korthak will detect us." Burke thought for a moment. The Silent Hunter was fast enough to escape if they were discovered, and the survivor might have important information about the enemy. "Do it." Lieutenant Clark worked at his controls for several minutes. Finally, he looked up and nodded. "Link established, sir. We're connected." Burke activated the communication system. He spoke slowly and clearly, hoping the translation software would work properly. "This is Captain Ryan Burke of the human ship, Silent Hunter. Can you hear me?" The response came immediately. The Zilani survivor's voice was filled with hope and disbelief. He identified himself as Scholar Kevtal, one of the few remaining members of the Zilani scientific community. Through the crackling transmission, Kevtal told Burke what had happened to his people. The Korthak had arrived without warning 6 months ago. They had demanded complete surrender. When the Zilani had tried to negotiate, the Korthak had begun destroying everything. "They do not want our resources," Kevtal explained. "They do not want our technology. They want us gone. They say our kind is too weak to deserve existence." Burke felt a cold anger building in his chest. He had seen war before, but this was different. This was extermination for its own sake. "How many of your people are still alive?" Burke asked. "I do not know. We lost contact with most colonies months ago. Perhaps thousands. Perhaps hundreds. Perhaps only dozens." Burke exchanged glances with his crew. The situation was even worse than they had feared. An entire civilization had been nearly wiped out while humanity debated what to do. "Scholar Keftal, help is coming. A human fleet will arrive soon, but I need information about the Korthak. Their ships, their weapons, their tactics." Over the next several hours, Kevtal shared everything he knew. The Korthak were a reptilian species from beyond the galactic rim. They had conquered 12 other star systems before attacking the Zilani. Their technology was crude but effective, relying on overwhelming firepower rather than precision. Most importantly, they had never encountered serious resistance. Every species they had attacked had either surrendered immediately or been destroyed quickly. They had no experience fighting an enemy that could match their strength, Burke recorded everything. The information would be invaluable when Admiral Cole arrived with the main fleet. But as he listened to Kevtal's descriptions of Korthak brutality, Burke felt his patience wearing thin. "Captain," Lieutenant Clark said during a break in the transmission, "I'm detecting Korthak patrol ships heading toward the planet's surface. They're scanning for survivors." Burke looked at the tactical display. 3 Korthak ships were moving toward Kevtal's location. If they found him, the scholar would be killed just like all the others. How long until they reach him? 2 hours. Maybe less. Burke stared at the screen. He could order the Silent Hunter to retreat. They had the information they needed. Admiral Cole would arrive in less than a week with enough firepower to destroy the entire Korthak fleet. Keftal was just one alien among billions of casualties, but Burke could not forget the desperate voice on the radio. This scholar had watched his entire civilization die. He had hidden in ruins for months, hoping against hope that someone would answer his calls for help. And now, when help had finally arrived, Burke was supposed to just leave him to die. "Clark, can we get a lock on those Korthak ships?" "Yes, sir." "They're within range of our torpedo tubes." Burke thought about his orders: reconnaissance only, no engagement with enemy forces. But those orders had been written before anyone knew how bad the situation really was. "Sir," his weapons officer spoke up, 3 ships is hardly a fair fight." Burke smiled grimly. "You're right. It's not fair at all. They have no idea what they're about to face." He turned to his crew. "Battle. Stations, we're going hunting." The Silent Hunter powered up her weapons and began moving toward the 3 Korthak ships. The enemy vessels were older models, heavily armed but slow and clumsy. They had no stealth technology and poor sensors. In other words, they were perfect targets for a human warship designed for this exact kind of operation. "Weapons ready, sir. Fire." The Silent Hunter's torpedoes streaked through space toward the unsuspecting Korthak ships. The enemy vessels never knew what hit them. All 3 exploded in brilliant flashes of light. That could be seen from the planet's surface. Burke reopened the communication channel to Kevtal. The scholar's voice was filled with amazement and hope. "The ships are gone. You destroyed them. How is this possible?" Burke looked out at the stars where the Korthak patrol had been. Soon, this entire system would be filled with human warships. The Korthak Empire was about to learn what happened when they picked a fight with Deathworlders. "Scholar Kevtal, stay hidden and stay alive. The real fleet will be here soon. And when they arrive, the Korthak are going to wish they had never heard of this system." Admiral Sandra Cole stood on the bridge of the Titan's Wrath as the massive human fleet dropped out of hyperspace. The Dreadnought was the largest warship ever built by humanity, bristling with weapons and carrying enough firepower to level a moon. Around her, 37 other ships appeared in perfect formation. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving a signal from Captain Burke. The Silent Hunter is requesting permission to dock." Cole nodded. Burke had been sending regular reports about the situation in the Zilani system. The news had gotten worse each day. The Korthak were not just conquering the aliens. They were hunting down every last survivor for sport. "Grant permission. I want to speak with Captain Burke immediately." Within an hour, Burke was standing in Cole's ready room. The reconnaissance captain looked tired and angry. He had been watching the Korthak slaughter innocents for a week while waiting for the fleet to arrive. "Report," Cole said simply. Burke activated a holographic display that showed the entire Zilani system. Red marks indicated Korthak ships. There were hundreds of them. "The situation is worse than we thought?" Burke began. "The Korthak have completely destroyed the Zilani civilization. We estimate less than 1,000 survivors remain, scattered across 3 planets." Cole studied the tactical display. The Korthak had positioned their ships to prevent any escape from the system. They were being thorough. "What about their military capabilities?" "Crude but effective. They rely on numbers and overwhelming firepower. Their ships are heavily armed but poorly designed. No stealth technology, weak sensors, and predictable tactics." Cole smiled grimly. "Sounds like they've never fought anyone who could fight back." That's exactly right, Admiral. Every species they've encountered has either surrendered or been destroyed quickly. They have no experience with prolonged combat. Burke pulled up another display showing detailed scans of Korthik ships. Their biggest weakness is coordination. Each ship operates independently. They don't use combined tactics or support each other effectively. What about their commander? A reptilian named Fakros. He's been broadcasting threats and demands across the system. From what we can tell, he's arrogant and overconfident. He believes his fleet is invincible. Cole turned to look out the window at the stars. In the distance, she could see the glow of the Zalani homeworld. Somewhere down there, the last survivors of an entire civilization were hiding in ruins, waiting for death. Admiral, Burke said quietly, I've been in contact with one of the survivors, a scholar named Kevtal. He's been providing intelligence about the Korthik. But more than that, he's been hoping. Hoping that someone would come to help his people. Cole looked back at Burke. What did you tell him? That help was coming. But Admiral, I'm not sure what form that help should take. The Korthik outnumber US 4-1. Even with our technological advantages, this is going to be a hard fight. Cole walked to her desk and picked up a datapad. It contained the original message from Elder Vexhai, the desperate plea that had started this whole chain of events. Captain Burke, do you know what this says? Yes, Admiral. It's a request for evacuation assistance. That's right. The Zalani asked for help getting away from the Korthik. They wanted to run and hide somewhere safe. Cole set down the datapad. But running away won't solve the problem. The Korthik will just find them again. Or they'll find someone else to destroy. Burke nodded slowly. So what do? We eliminate the threat permanently. Cole activated the ship's communication system. Her voice was broadcast to every vessel in the fleet. This is Admiral Cole to all ships. We have entered a system where genocide is being committed. An entire civilization has been destroyed for no reason other than the Korthik belief that they are superior. This ends now. She paused, looking out at the stars where the Korthik fleet waited. Our mission is not to rescue the Zalani. Our mission is to ensure that the Korthik never threaten anyone again. We will give them one chance to surrender unconditionally. If they refuse, we will destroy every last one of their ships. The response from the fleet was immediate. Across 38 ships, human crews prepared for battle. Weapons were charged, shields were raised, and targeting systems locked onto enemy vessels. Admiral, her tactical officer reported, we're being scanned by Korthik ships. They've detected our presence. Open a channel to their command ship. The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of a Korthik vessel. Commander Thakros stood in the center, his reptilian features twisted with surprise and anger. He was larger than Cole had expected, with scales that looked like armor and eyes that burned with hatred. Who dares enter my domain? Thakros demanded. This system belongs to the Korthik Empire. You will leave immediately or be destroyed. Cole stepped forward so the alien could see her clearly. I am Admiral Sandra Cole of the Human Colonial Defense Force you have committed genocide against the Zalani people. You will surrender your fleet immediately and submit to judgment. Thakros laughed, a harsh sound that echoed across the communication channel. Humans? I have never heard of your species. You must be another weak race like the Zalani. How many ships do you have? 40, 50? 38 ships, Cole replied calmly. 38? Thakros laughed again. I have over 200 ships. You are outnumbered 5-1. Surrender now, and I will kill you quickly. Cole looked at the alien commander with cold eyes. You misunderstand the situation, Commander. This is not a negotiation. This is a warning. You have 10 minutes to surrender unconditionally. After that, we will destroy your fleet. Impossible, Thakros snarled. No species has ever defeated the Korthik Empire. We are the strongest warriors in the galaxy. We have conquered 12 star systems. We have destroyed countless civilizations. That was before you met humans, Cole said simply. 10 minutes, Commander. Choose wisely. Cole cut the communication and turned to her crew. All ships, prepare for battle. Target their command vessel first. I want Thakros to see his fleet burning around him before we finish him. Admiral. Her communications officer said, "We're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface." "It's the Zalani survivor that Captain Burke was in contact with," Cole nodded. "Put him through." The voice of Scholar Kevtal came over the speakers. The alien sounded amazed and frightened at the same time. "Admiral Cole, I have been watching your ships. They are magnificent, but the Korthak have so many vessels." "How can you possibly defeat them?" Cole smiled. "Scholar Kevtal, you're about to see something that the Korthak have never experienced before. You're about to see what happens when predators encounter apex predators." She turned to her weapons officer. "Status report." "All systems ready, Admiral." "Target locks acquired on enemy vessels." Cole looked at the tactical display. The Korthak fleet was moving toward them in a disorganized mass. Each ship was trying to be the first to engage the humans. They had no formation, no coordination, no plan other than to overwhelm the enemy with numbers. 5 minutes remaining, Cole announced to the fleet. "Let's show them what human military precision looks like." The human ships began to move into attack formation. Each vessel knew its role and position. They moved like a single organism. Deadly and efficient, on the Korthak command ship, Thakros watched the human fleet with growing unease. These ships moved differently than any he had seen before. They were coordinated, disciplined, and somehow seemed much more dangerous than their small numbers suggested. "Admiral," the tactical officer reported, 10 minutes have elapsed." Cole nodded. "Open fire. Target their command ship first." The battle for the Zalani system began with a barrage of human weapons that lit up the darkness of space. The Korthak were about to learn that in the galaxy there were predators and then there were humans. The first salvo from the human fleet lit up the darkness like a second sun. Dozens of missiles and energy beams streaked across space toward the Korthak command ship. Commander Thakros watched in horror as his shields collapsed under the assault. Half his bridge crew was killed in the first few seconds. "Impossible," Thakros roared as he pulled himself up from the deck. "No species has weapons this powerful." His communications officer, blood running down his scaled face, looked up from his damaged console. "Sir, we're receiving damage reports from across the fleet. The humans are targeting our command ships first? They're cutting off our coordination?" Thakros looked at his tactical display. The human ships were moving in perfect formation, each one supporting the others. They fought like a single creature with many heads, striking at multiple targets simultaneously while protecting themselves from counterattack. "All ships, attack!" Thakros commanded. "Destroy the human fleet." The Korthak ships charged forward. In a disorganized mass, each captain wanted to be the first to claim victory over the mysterious humans. They had no plan, no coordination, no strategy beyond overwhelming their enemies with sheer numbers. Admiral Cole watched the Korthak advance from the bridge of the Titan's Wrath. Her tactical officer was calling out enemy positions and weapon signatures. Her crews were working with the precision of a fine machine. "Admiral," Captain Steve Miller reported from the destroyer Valiant, "the enemy is breaking formation. They're coming at us in 3 separate groups?" Cole smiled coldly. "Just like Captain Burke predicted. They don't know how to fight as a unit. Split them up further. Group Alpha, take the ships coming from the left. Group Beta, handle the center. Group Gamma, you have the right flank." The human fleet divided into 3 smaller formations. Each group moved to intercept one of the Korthak attacks. But instead of meeting them head-on, the human ships used their superior speed and maneuverability to strike from unexpected angles. The destroyer Valiant fired a spread of torpedoes into the side of a Korthak heavy cruiser. The alien ship exploded in a ball of fire and debris. Before the other Korthak ships could respond, the Valiant was already moving to its next target. "Sir," the Valiant's weapons officer reported to Captain Miller, "that was easier than shooting practice targets." Miller nodded grimly. These aliens have never fought anyone who could hit back. They're used to terrorizing civilians, not fighting trained soldiers. Across the battlefield, the story was the same. The human ships moved like sharks among a school of fish. They struck hard and fast, then disappeared before the Korthik could respond. Every shot was precise. Every maneuver calculated for maximum effect. Captain Julia Martinez commanded the heavy cruiser Thunderbolt as it engaged 3 Korthik battleships. The enemy vessels were larger and more heavily armed, but they moved like drunken giants. Their weapons were powerful but slow and inaccurate. "Target their weapon systems," Martinez ordered. "I want them helpless, not dead, not yet." The Thunderbolt's guns fired with surgical precision. Each shot disabled weapons, destroyed shield generators, or knocked out engines. Within minutes, the 3 Korthik battleships were floating helplessly in space. "Now what?" her tactical officer asked. "Now we move on to the next group. Leave them for the Marines to deal with." Colonel Pete Johnson watched the battle from the assault carrier Freedom's Edge. His Marines were eager to join the fight, but their role would come later. For now, they watched as the human fleet systematically destroyed the Korthik war machine. "Look at that," Sergeant Amy Walsh said, pointing at the main display. "The aliens are starting to panic," Johnson nodded. The Korthik formation was collapsing. Ships were fleeing in all directions, abandoning their wounded comrades. Some were trying to surrender, others were attempting to escape the system entirely. "They're not used to losing," Johnson observed. "They've probably never had a fight last more than a few minutes." On the surface of the Zalani homeworld, Scholar Kevtal watched the battle through his damaged telescope. The human ships moved through the Korthik fleet like lightning through storm clouds. Every few seconds, another enemy vessel would explode or go dark. "Incredible," Kevtal whispered to himself. "They fight like the old legends, like the warrior gods of ancient times." The scholar activated his radio to contact the human fleet. "Admiral Cole, this is Scholar Kevtal. What you are doing is impossible. How are you defeating so many ships?" Cole's voice came back calm and steady. "Scholar, the Korthik made a mistake. They thought that because they were good at killing defenseless people, they were good at war. They're not. They're just bullies who never met anyone stronger than them. But there are so many of them. Numbers don't matter if you don't know how to use them. The Korthik are fighting like a mob. We're fighting like a military." As if to prove her point, a group of 12 Korthik ships tried to surround the human destroyer Defiant. The alien vessels moved in from all sides, thinking they had trapped their prey. Instead, the Defiant used their own numbers against them. The destroyer fired its weapons in a carefully calculated pattern. Each shot was aimed not just at an enemy ship, but at the space where that ship would be after it tried to avoid the first shot. The Korthik ships, trying to dodge, flew directly into the path of other weapons. Within minutes, all 12 Korthik ships were destroyed or disabled. The Defiant had not taken a single hit. Commander Thakros watched his fleet disintegrate around him. Half his ships were destroyed, and the others were fleeing or surrendering. His dreams of conquest were turning into a nightmare of defeat. "Sir," his communications officer said, "we're receiving a transmission from the human admiral." Thakros straightened his uniform and tried to look dignified. "Put her through." Admiral Cole appeared on the screen. Behind her, the bridge of the Titan's Wrath hummed with quiet efficiency. "Commander Thakros, your fleet is defeated. Surrender now, and your surviving crews will be treated according to the laws of war." Thakros snarled, "Never. The Korthik Empire does not surrender to inferior species." "Then you will die with your ship," Cole said simply. "But your crew doesn't have to die with you." She opened a channel to all the Korthik vessels. "This is Admiral Cole to all Korthik ships. Your commander has chosen death over honor. Any ship that surrenders immediately will be spared. Any ship that continues to fight will be destroyed." One by one, Korthik ships began to signal their surrender. Their crews had seen enough of human military precision. They knew they could not win. Thakros screamed orders at his remaining ships, but few listened. Within an hour, only his command ship remained in the fight. All ships, target the command vessel, Cole ordered, and this. The combined firepower of the human fleet focused on Thacros' ship. The alien commander's last words were a curse against the humans who had destroyed his empire. When the battle was over, the Zelani system was quiet for the first time in months. The Korthak fleet was destroyed or captured. The survivors were being processed by human marines, who treated them with professional courtesy despite their crimes. Admiral Cole opened a channel to the planet's surface. Scholar Kevtal, this is Admiral Cole. The Korthak threat has been eliminated. You and your people are safe. The scholar's voice was filled with wonder and gratitude. Admiral, you have done the impossible. You have saved us from extinction. How can we ever repay you? Cole smiled. You don't need to repay us, scholar. Protecting innocent people is what we do. But I do have a question for you. Anything, Admiral. Your people sent out a distress call asking for evacuation. But the Korthak would have followed you wherever you went. They would have found you again. Would you like to make sure that never happens? What do you mean? I mean, would you like to join the Human Colonial Defense Network? We protect civilizations that can't protect themselves. In exchange, you share your knowledge and help us make the galaxy safer for everyone. Kevtol was quiet for a long moment. Admiral, when we sent out our call for help, we expected rescue ships to come and take us away. We never expected this. What did you expect? We expected someone to help us run away. We never expected someone to eliminate the threat entirely. Cole nodded. Scholar, that's the difference between asking for aid and asking for help from humans. We don't just treat the symptoms, we cure the disease. As the human fleet began establishing a permanent presence in the Zelani system, word of the battle spread to other civilizations. The galaxy learned that there was a new force among the stars. A species that responded to calls for help not with charity, but with overwhelming military force directed at those who threatened the innocent. The Korthak Empire was finished. But more importantly, other predator species now knew that their victims might have very dangerous friends. The humans had arrived, and they were here to stay.